Well, joining us now to discuss this issue is Dimitri Diliani, a member of the Fatah Revolutionary Council, and he's joining us from East Jerusalem. Also with us, Michal Kotler-Wunsch, Israeli parliament member and special parliamentary representative to the ICC. She's speaking to us from Nesarim outside Jerusalem. And Michal, let me just start with you. Why shouldn't the ICC have jurisdiction over these issues?
Well, thanks, Calev. Actually, 7 countries and several international law experts explained exactly why, and that is that the foundational principle of jurisdiction actually wasn't proven in this case, right? So you cannot create a state by recognizing it in a statute to which Israel is not a state party, by a court that Israel is not a state party to, and create a state that doesn't exist, i.e. the state of Palestine, that has actually made these allegations as a member of the Rome Statute without having jurisdiction to any territorial area that comes with it. And so it's a double-edged sword, or if you like, holding the stick at both ends. And I'll say one more thing, and that is that this is meant to be a court of last resort. And as we know, the additional foundational principle, that of complementarity, is that the state of Israel has a rule of law, has legal mechanisms, has courts that can be turned to, and does not require the court of last resort, which is needed by those civilians all over the world whose human rights are violated as we speak, that do not have a court of law to turn to. That and those are the mandates of the ICC. Those are the foundational principles, and neither of those, neither jurisdiction nor complementarity, according to 7 countries that submitted amicus briefs and many international law experts, were represented exactly saying that. The court has ignored and chose to ignore the majority opinion, of course, not accepting those views.
All right, well, certainly I want to get Dimitri's response to those points, and maybe address also, Dimitri, if you can, the points made in that video report that this is the Palestinians, Hamas, and some might argue the Palestinian Authority over some of its policies could also face prosecution in the ICC.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. And I'm really impressed with the picture that has nothing to do with the real. I thought she was talking about Switzerland, honestly, not the country, not a state that occupies other people's land and put under siege more than 2 million people in Gaza, and has illegal settlements and daily clashes with civilians, killing them daily, putting people in administrative detention without court, going to court. That is not a democracy. It cannot.
It looks like we may have lost
the democracy. Most likely that I heard the prosecutors yesterday's statement, and I saw it on the internet, and it's very clear that they are moving forward, and they do not need any prerequisite taken decision to move forward to the investigation of the state of Israel. Pretty sure us as Palestinians, we will be subject to some of investigation. But let's go back to how this came about. What brought us to this point? What brought us to this point is in 2012, when we applied for an observer state in the United Nations. Israel's response.
And Dimitri,
basically and killed 2,000 civilians. And furthermore, when we went to get a resolution to give us a state by 2017, we were vetoed by the United States of America, which asked us to resort to the ever failing negotiations under its auspices. So the ICC was the next step to be taken. As a response to all of that, we had 2,000 people dying in short few days, and there was nothing happening. So the president was under pressure to move forward to the next step, and the ICC was the next step for him. And I believe that it's taken too long. This is too late, and let justice be served. If Israel committed war crimes, let it be. Let Israel pay the price. If the Palestinians committed war crimes, let us pay the price. But we cannot call that this. We cannot make the occupation beautiful and a democracy with justice. This is just rubbish.
I wanted to give now Michal a chance to respond. And then maybe specifically, I guess, the argument, Dimitri saying that Israel has basically denied the Palestinians other diplomatic outlets to address these issues. And that is the result of it going to the ICC to seek redress.
Yeah, so I didn't hear everything that Dimitri said, but I will say, Calev, that it's very important we understand that actually addressing this issue through the ICC is actually a violation of the Oslo Accords, the organizing document between Israel and the Palestinians. And the way to actually create or end the conflict is actually not through a misuse or abuse of a court of law that was meant to uphold and protect certain foundational principles of international law. So there is no bypassing of direct negotiations in order to create a solution, whatever it may be, between Israel and the Palestinians. And actually, as we mark, the continuation of the Abraham Accords, we pretty much have the way forward. It requires very basic things, beginning with the recognition of the right of the State of Israel to exist as Jewish and democratic, then enabling negotiation, and ultimately paving the path to peace and prosperity for both peoples, even if the leadership may not be ready to do that. But I will say, with regards to the ICC, it's very important that we understand this court was built, as I said, as a court of last resort, built upon foundational principles of international law, that of jurisdiction, that of complementarity, neither of which are meant in this case. And it's very important to understand that as the PA actually submitted and took responsibility for both the people in Judea and Samaria and East Jerusalem and in Gaza, they cannot hold the stick at both ends and must be held to account for violations of international law, including the holding of 2 deceased soldiers, Hadar Golden and Aron Shaul, and 2 civilians, Avera Mengistu and Hisham Asayed, since the 2014 Gaza war. So that, again, you have to be held to account if you are to benefit from the protections of international law.
I want to give Dimitri a chance to respond, but also specifically the point that many Israelis make, that at the end of the day, the Palestinians are more interested in scoring some diplomatic points rather than moving ahead toward arriving to some kind of negotiated solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
Your guest said something about the Oslo Accord. I can't believe she still remembers that. We were supposed to be having a state, an independent state along these 1967 borders by then. By that time, we were only having about 30% of the illegal Israeli settlers in living in the West Bank. I cannot believe how detached from reality and how this PR show is happening. She's talking about the 2 deceased soldiers. I'm talking about 300 deceased Palestinian civilians still held in Israel and refusing. You killed them and you refuse to give us their bodies. We're not talking about 2, we're talking about 300. We're talking about more than 5,000 political detainees. We're talking about more than a couple of hundred administrative detention detainees. These people are put in jail without appearing in court, without a charge, including the Jerusalem ID holders that supposedly have the same Israeli rights as we pay, the same taxes and more. So please save me the rhetoric. Save me the story that you sell to your sponsors, because I'm a Palestinian living under occupation. I get arrested all the time without a charge. I keep on getting harassed.
But Dimitri, the question is the question is how to move on. Is the way to move on going through the ICC, or is it through negotiated settlement?
Well, the way it goes on, when Israel stops violating our rights, we move forward. You cannot be building settlements, eating up the land that we agreed both that we're going to have our state on that land. You keep on eating up with settlements. You keep on changing facts on the ground, and you come in town and you wasted 25 years expanding and expanding. You virtually made it impossible for a Palestinian state to be established.
All right.
And I'm one of the voices who's calling for one-state solution. So I can
I just want to give. I just want
to you making my point.
Give Michal a chance to respond.
Yeah, Calev, I just want to say that actually the way that this conversation is going makes exactly the point, and that is that the ICC decision is clearly political and not legal. And I remind us that it is a court of law, a court of last resort, meant to uphold, promote, and protect the human rights of civilians that actually have no court to turn to, whether it's a million Uyghurs in China or the people of Syria or the people of Iran. And so exactly the point of this conversation has been made. The ICC decision is a political one, and the imperative for all trustees of international law and human rights, for those countries that fund the ICC, for those member states of the Rome Statute and the ICC, to actually begin the reform that is so imperative for the ICC to fulfill the mission that it was meant to uphold, promote, and protect.
We'll have to end on that, but I'm certain these discussions will continue. Dimitri Diliani, Michal Kotlowonj,
Start
thank
the
you.
discussion and end it.